Talks. We're joined by David Walker. He's the founder and CEO of the Come Back America Initiative, a self-described nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, also the former CEO of the Peterson Foundation. Great to have you with us, David.
Good to be back.
Okay, so outside of eating the peas, I mean, what President Obama wants is a grand bargain. Is he going to get it on the budget?
He's probably not going to get it in the first step. Now, he's now got the high ground. He said he's willing to put Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security on the table. He wants to go for the long ball. Now the Republicans are somewhat in retreat. I think what's going to end up happening is they're going to agree on somewhat less cuts, a smaller deal, if you will. But, we have to keep something in perspective. This is over 10 years. They're talking about cutting $2 trillion or $4 trillion over 10 years.
Right.
You can do that in a way that doesn't undercut the economic recovery, that phases things in over time.
So the cuts would be delayed, essentially, right?
That's right. I mean, it depends upon the nature of the cuts. I mean, if they, for example, are changes to entitlement programs, you're going to have to phase those in, if you will, okay? If there are things with regard to defense, you're going to phase down a presence in Southwest Asia. If there are things that deal with restructuring existing government programs or tax incentives, you may phase that in over a period of time. So it's not all at once, and we need to recognize the difference between the short term and the structural.
Well, all of these things, though, I mean, talking about $4 trillion, $2 trillion, $2.5 trillion, this pales in comparison to the underlying fiscal condition of the United States. None of this in the debt ceiling debate is really about overall fiscal health. How do we pivot to have that conversation?
We need to have it as part of the 2012 election. Frankly, both parties have a very different vision about how to put our finances in order. And what we need to do is to have a fact-based, nonpartisan, non-ideological citizen education and engagement effort that will state the facts, speak the truth, put the tough choices on the table.
It's hard for me to contain my cynicism when you say that.
No. I've done it in 48 states. All right, the American people are a lot smarter than people get them credit for. If you tell them the truth, if you help them understand the options, they can accept tougher choices. They care about what's done, what order it's done, and that matters. We need tens of trillions over several decades.
But Lizzie, I mean, right now, though, what budget are they working off of, though? I mean, because there's a lot out there.
There's a lot out there, and they're each sort of working off of their own budgets. Frankly, the House Republicans are looking at what they passed, which was going nowhere with their companions in the Senate. So they want to see discretionary spending, for example, at 2008 levels. That's probably not going to happen. The president's willing to negotiate on some of those things, but the big tough cuts come in entitlement spending.
They're basically going with CBO baseline, the Congressional Budget Office, which is the nonpartisan agency in the legislative branch. So that's basically, the baseline, if you will, and that's what the commissions typically go with, and that's what we go with at the Come Back America Initiative. We're going to come out with something next Wednesday that's going to cut anywhere from 20 to 30 trillion off the deficit by 2035, with with actions in a whole range of areas where everything's on the table, and I think
you're sending them off. You're going to send that off to Congress, or
it's going to go to Congress. It's going to go to the administration. It's going to go to the press. It's it's going to be made publicly available.
But of course, you have to eventually boil down all of these different budgets and all of these different options. What do you think, David? Then in the end, which entitlement program is not going to be touched the most?
Well, right now, Social Security is probably not going to be touched, and frankly, it's the least challenged of our entitlement programs. We can make changes phased in over time, leaving people that are, 55 or 60 and over largely untouched, and every generation can get more than they think they're going to get. I call that a victory, But what you need is leadership. You need to get away from, the partisan battles and the ideological divides, and we'll lay out a framework that can get that done, that would get broad acceptance among the American people.
I have one question. I want to take a quick turn with you because you're talking about Congress, but you're also eyeing a place in Congress from a somewhat casual spot in Connecticut. Are you going to run for the Senate in Connecticut? And will you stay a registered independent, which you are now?
I am a registered independent now. I have been for 14 years. I was a registered Republican for 21 years before that. I am being recruited heavily to run. A lot of people want me to run. Just because they want me to doesn't mean that I will. I am going to wait a number of months before I make a decision.
How many?
If I run to win, and I think I can win in Connecticut.
When are you going to decide?
I don't feel any compulsion to decide before early next year.
Okay.
Because I can raise the money. I've got a national base. I can raise the money.
How key of a role is Geithner playing in this, David?
He plays a very important role. He's the chief fiscal officer. He's the ranking economic, policy advisor.
But in getting,
to the
but
president.
in the last inning here is what I mean.
Oh, here's the
how
role.
key?
If we hit the debt ceiling limit, all right, the executive branch is going to have to decide what bills get paid, what bills don't get paid. And the fact is, bondholders are protected by the 14th Amendment. But we're spending $4 billion a day, every day, including weekends, more than we're taking in. So you've got to decide who's not going to get paid, who's going to get laid off. The taxpayers will pay the interest and penalties for not paying on time under the Prompt Payment Act. The people who get laid off will probably end up getting paid retroactively when the deal is passed. The taxpayers pay for that. And the real wild card, as you know, is what's going to happen to interest rates. If the largest economy on earth, if the sole superpower on earth, if the entity that has 60% of global reserve currency has to decide which bills it's going to pay and which ones it's not going to pay, that's going to have an interest rate impact. And for every 1% increase in interest rates, 100 basis points, it's about $150 billion a year in interest, for which we get absolutely nothing.
Right, nothing in return.
Nothing.
But I was out in Sun Valley with Warren Buffett,
Yeah,
and
sure.
what he said is that, look, and he's saying theoretically, even if we default, right? I mean, we're a country that can print our own money, though. I mean, we can still pay the bills.
The question
Yes,
is,
it's
what's the
inflationary,
money worth,
right.
and what interest rates are we going to have to pay? Look, we are going to meet our obligations, but the question is, what interest rates are we going to have to pay, and what is the dollar going to be worth? Look at what's happening in the markets. People are buying our debt. They're not buying 30-year bonds. They're not buying 10-year bonds. The only people that are doing that are the Federal Reserve. That's self-dealing. The Chinese, the Japanese, or other, they're buying our bonds, but they're buying short-term instruments so that they don't have interest rate risk and currency risk. And they're smart, because we have to start putting our finances in order. We're not exempt from the laws of prudent finance.
They know that they don't want to lose the value on those holdings by holding them too long. David, thank you for staying with
Yeah,
us.
good to see you.
That was David Walker of the Come Back America Initiative.